My childhood was surrounded with Game Boy games. I don't really have a Game Boy that works anymore, but that's where the Analogue Pocket could be your ticket back to your cartridge past. The Analogue Pocket is this handheld that's been anticipated for a while. It's finally here, well, sort of, if you pre-ordered it, but for a lot of people, it's still really hard to get. And it's a handheld that is a dedicated retro super device. So this is specifically if you are the type of person who has collected a lot of old cartridges and doesn't know what to do with them and feels nostalgic. Analogue has other hardware that they're well known for. Recreations of the Super NES and the Genesis, and they're really beautiful and they work with HDMI. The Analogue Pocket is kind of the same idea. This is a bright 3.5-inch LCD display that's high resolution. It charges with the USB-C. It connects with your TV with a dock over HDMI, and it plays a bunch of games, but specifically Game Boy games. Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and with adapters, Sega Game Gear, Neo Geo Pocket, and Atari Lynx. It doesn't play DS games, just letting you know. Who isn't this for? Well, I mean, if you're a handheld gaming person, and there are a lot of gaming handhelds out there, including the Nintendo Switch, this may not be that system for you because it's not internet connected. It's not going to download games. It's not going to update software. It's not a repository for lots of subscription gaming type things. I mean, if you get a Nintendo Switch, there are a ton of great games. And that's the thing, is the Switch Lite is $200. Same territory as this, but it's apples and oranges completely. Because if you're buying one of these, you're looking for something that can play old games and can play them really, really well. What's interesting about the Analogue Pocket is that all of their game playing hardware is built into the chips. They're not about emulators, and it's also not about playing ROMs. So there's a whole other market out there that if you're going to be getting into retro is about downloading, there's a gray area of downloading ROMs for games. People do it, Raspberry Pi and other things like that. This doesn't do that. This is not a ROM game system. This only plays cartridge games. Although, you could design games that play on the Pocket. Analogue supports a GB Studio software program that allows you to create retro games and then download them in a Pocket form, Pocket file, that can load onto a micro SD card and then play on these. Also, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole of retro tech, there is a video game music software program called Nano. It's really a sequencer that plays all sorts of retro tones and other things. It's MIDI compatible, and you could use this as a musical instrument. I launched Nano on this and had no idea what I was doing. Okay, it wasn't my childhood, but it was high school that I played a lot of Game Boy games. I'm older, and I still have a bunch of them. Not all of them. I have Alleyway. Remember Quirk, the tomato, which was an Acclaim game, which is a puzzle? These games play really well on the Analogue Pocket. When I plugged them in, they all played, and they look fantastic. The display is super crisp and has a variety of extra modes. I mean, if you want to customize this, you can. Not only in terms of where the screen is placed, but in terms of the color palette. The Analogue Pocket has retro palettes that are matched to different variants of the hardware. You can bring up the green and black Game Boy. You can bring up what the Game Boy Pocket had, some of the backlighting effects. There's even a red LED version that is mimicking the round pinball matrix display that kind of looks like a Virtual Boy. There's also Analogue's own, sort of perfect version of the black and white monochromatic mode that looks really crisp and sharp. I really appreciate those extra touches, and the hardware feels really good. The display is great, the sound's good, the buttons are pretty good too. I still love the original Game Boy buttons, but the D-pad and these 4 buttons are fine. The shoulder buttons here, which work with Game Boy Advance games, are a little cramped feeling, but they remind me of the Game Boy Advance SP that would fold up. Keep in mind too that yes, you could play Game Boy games on a Nintendo DS or 3DS and download some of those games, but Nintendo doesn't make the DS or the 3DS anymore. You kind of have to shop around, and you might have one, and they haven't put those libraries onto the Switch. So you have this unique catalog of games that it's compatible with, that you may have fun with. I found plugging in one at a time was a kind of a refreshing remove from reality. I found like I wasn't worried about updates and I didn't feel tempted by other games, but I forgot how simple some of these games are. And in some ways that's nice, kind of head clearing. Other times I felt like, you know, maybe I had enough of it. So it turns out I don't just have a lot of Game Boy games, I have a whole bunch of Game Gear games and a Sega Game Gear that I used to play a lot too. The Sega Game Gear cartridges play on the Analogue Pocket with a separately sold adapter. It plugs into the back and then you plug your Game Gear games in. It's a little bit fragile feeling, so I took care plugging it in, but so far all the cartridges I have work mostly. Sometimes I had to blow the dust out a bit, no surprise. Other times, a couple of games like Joe Montana Football looked like they were performing a little weirdly. And I wasn't sure if Castle of Illusion with Mickey Mouse was cutting off some of the borders. But a lot of the games looked a lot crisper than they do on the Game Gear screen, which somehow surprisingly still works. Now, I love that I can tap into these. I do feel at some point I'm going to get tired of it, and I'm probably going to go back to my Nintendo Switch and my game consoles and VR and iPad and all that other stuff. I'm drowning in gaming content, so it's not like I have a real need or even time to get back to all of these games. But it's really fun to revisit, and if you're a collector and you love the idea of getting these games, I don't think there is a nicer, dedicated piece of hardware right now that can play classic Game Boy games like the Analogue Pocket does. I mean, it's a real love letter to the hardware. Whether you'll be able to get one, that is the question. But I wouldn't really feel a lot of FOMO or regret about this if you're any other type of a gamer, because I think you're much better off going with some other option. It is cool though that you could plug in your Game Boy games and play them on a TV with wireless controllers. You could even connect another Game Boy or Analogue Pocket to it with a Game Boy link cable because it has the port for that. It's a really complete and interesting idea. I didn't know what to expect out of the Analogue Pocket. I thought maybe I'd be getting the best Game Boy experience ever, and having played just about every Game Boy that has ever been made, because I own them all, this is the best Game Boy I think that's ever been made. I mean, the display is spectacular. I love that it's got a rechargeable battery that lasts about, what do they say, about 6 to 10 hours. It seems to be lasting pretty well so far. And with updates, this could get a lot more interesting. There is going to be this whole Analogue OS that's going to catalog all of the games that are out there. Now, it's not going to be a way to download those games, but it'll be able to identify, apparently, which cartridge you have and maybe what variant of the cartridge, and could be a doorway to sharing game save states. The thing that's just great is that it will eventually have the ability to save games. Right now, there are no game save capabilities on this, on the version I tested, except for a beta software update that allows you to do a quick save state when putting it to sleep. But the fact that you could save any game at any point is really exciting too, because some of these games didn't have any battery save backup type things. I mean, some games still have save states on them, like my Zelda game and ones like that, and Metroid Fusion, but a lot of them do not. So it would be great to get that feature added in. But the thing is, would I carry this around? You know, the Analogue Pocket is a little big, it's a little heavy. It's not actually all that pocketable. It's a little bit the size of a Nintendo 3DS XL when closed. And the display is a bit raised. Although it's Gorilla Glass, I'm worried about scratching it. There are glass protectors and there are hard cases that Analogue makes for this, but I feel like I'd want to display this or dock it or coddle it as opposed to take it around with me. And I don't think I'd carry that many cartridges. I think the Analogue Pocket is a system that I'd want to keep around to play the games I already own, but it wouldn't replace the handhelds that I already use. Anyway, that's my thought on the Analogue Pocket at the end of 2021. I'm Scott, thanks for watching, and if you have comments, leave them down below.